given the Financial Times is reporting as many as 500 people a week could be dying as a result of those delays. Sammy's in Edgware this morning. Hi, Sammy.
Hi there. Sorry. My personal experience, obviously I can't mention a hospital name. I do work for NHS as well, but I was waiting for an operation last year. One hospital near to me didn't even respond to the referral GP made. But then months later, when it was getting worse, I was referred to another hospital where they responded within 2 weeks, and I had an operation within 6 weeks. So we've had a lot of changes with this virus and everything, and NHS and staffing, obviously, people that want to join in. I think maybe the government and the heads of NHS should look into new ways of doing things. Obviously, we've got old way we used to do things, and obviously we're doing a lot of online things. So I think if there was a plan to reorganize the system, it might work better. I'm sorry about the young person because mental health is very serious.
Well, I think, Sammy, listen, we talk a lot, rightly, about the difficulties in hospitals with GPs, A&E, ambulances, social care. I think the dog that needs to bark louder in all of that discussion is about mental health, because as I see it, there has been an absolute tsunami of mental health cases, partly as a result of the pandemic, and there just isn't the support available. Thank you for the call. Helena's in Kettering on that. Hi, Helena.
Hello there.
Hi. You want to talk about your son?
Yeah, my son has got very scared at the beginning of the COVID outbreak. He had high anxiety, and being isolated from the rest of their peer groups didn't help any children, I think, over this period in time. He was actually getting suicidal. I called my doctor. I said, my son is having suicidal ideation. They said, right, we'll put him onto the CAMS helpline list, and somebody will call you. Well, crickets, basically. It was 2 years before we finally got to the head of the queue for waiting to have an appointment with somebody. They rang us to say that, yes, we've got an appointment for you. And once that appointment has gone through, you'll go to the medication review stage. And that's where we are. So I sent him to live with his father in North America, because at least there they'll be able to access psychiatric care, because here, even the private psychiatric care, you have to go through CAMS.
So you sent your son to North America, to Canada, to get help more quickly than he would otherwise receive in this country?
Because in this country, I'm a raging socialist, and I never thought I would say this, but there needs to be a section of private psychiatric practitioners who are allowed to treat children who are.
I don't understand why there wouldn't be. Why would there not be?
I don't understand. You have to go through CAMS, and I've even rung practitioners and said, "Please, my son's desperate." Well, if he's that desperate, you can go through CAMS, and they'll send him to the top of the list. Been on the top of the list for at least 6 months now.
Helen, just finally, how is he? Is he all right?
He seems fine. I mean, I think there's a big surge in kind of like a new world, new opportunities and everything for him there. So at the moment, he's quite hyper. I do worry for his mental health that he's going to crash hard. But at least there, they can pick up the phone and, as his father is covered with insurance, say,
get some help.
Please see my son and get in that day.
Well, Helena, listen, we wish him the best. Thank you very much indeed for the call. Absolutely horrifying, actually. Thank you very much for that. Back to your calls in just a moment. 8:24 is the time. Let's come back to this story on the 6-month anniversary, the 6 months on from the start of the war in Ukraine, the beginning of the Russian invasion. James Heappey joins us, Armed Forces Minister, Conservative MP for Wales. Thank you for coming on the programme this morning, Mr Heappey. I wonder if you are detecting what the Telegraph is reporting this morning, that some EU nations are considering calling for sanctions on Russia to be loosened to ease pressure on the economy. Are you hearing that? Are you seeing that? Morning.
Morning. No, I'm not seeing it. Of course, it's a danger. I think that it is very attractive to think that an easy way out of the cost of living challenges that are present in all European economies at the moment would be to stop supporting Ukraine, bring the war to an end, and then ease the sanctions so that we can all get back to the way things were and energy prices back at the way they were. I think that is the wrong analysis. And I don't think, by the way, that many governments around Europe seriously hold that as a view, because A, we won't get back to where we were. The Ukrainians won't stop fighting. And if Putin is rewarded territorially for his aggression, he won't stop. He didn't stop after South Ossetia or Abkhazia in Georgia. He didn't stop after he took Crimea. He will just use Europe's acquiescence as an opportunity to regroup, and then he will go again into more of Ukraine or into Moldova or into the Baltic or whatever else. So it is right to stand firm. And I think, exactly as Joseph Borrell, the EU's foreign policy leader, has been saying, we need to make sure that everybody in Europe keeps their solidarity.
The French President Emmanuel Macron has said that his country will support Ukraine for the long term. Yeah. He said that the rising inflation, the rising food prices, the rising cost of energy is, to use his words, the cost of freedom. Do you agree with that? Is that what we're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is. I mean, that is obviously a sort of a powerful soundbite, but broadly, that is right. I mean, the inflation that is going on around the world is firstly a consequence of a reawakening of the global supply chains after the pandemic, but then a war in Ukraine. The international community did the right thing in acting as one and imposing sanctions and accepting in that huge cost to their own economies. But people have to sort of understand that geostrategically, we are at, I think, a bit of an inflection point. If the world does the right thing through Ukraine, in Ukraine, to stop Russia, it will send a message to President Xi and to the Iranians who still pursue nuclear bombs that the world stands behind a rules-based international system and is willing to accept pain in order to collectively do the right thing. If we don't do that, if the international consensus fractures, then it emboldens not only Putin, but Xi and others to make the next 20, 30 years of this century very uncomfortable and therefore very expensive.
Let me come on to other matters regarding the defence of the realm and the involvement of the armed forces in a variety of different policy areas. I'll turn to the front page of the Times in just a moment about the red arrows engulfed by what they say is bullying and assault row. But can I ask you about the number of people making the journey across the Channel? What currently is the involvement of the Navy in the Channel in turning back some of those boats?
In terms of turning them back, none. And we've never claimed to have any involvement in turning them back.
Who's in charge of the operation in the Channel? Because back in January, the MOD said that it was due to take over command of the operation in the Channel by the end of the month. But since then, there have been reported rows between the MOD, your department, and the Home Office about who's really in charge. Who's running it?
We are. We took command of the operation in the Channel, I think from memory, in April. And Tom, I wouldn't want your listeners to think that my answer to your first question is to say that we're not involved. We are, but your question was in turning them back, and turn back tactics is not something that the Royal Navy nor Royal Marines thought that they could safely do. And that, if you'll indulge me, is because there is no space between the eastbound and westbound shipping lanes in the Dover Straits, and thus you would be deliberately colliding with another vessel in an international shipping lane, which no mariner in good conscience could do. So the turn back tactics were not something we sought to employ, but what we did say we would assist our friends in Border Force in doing, and we've taken command of the operation in the Channel to do so, is to achieve control over the flow. Now that is easily dismissed because I've heard people say that it's nothing but a taxi service. But the fact is that nobody bar one boat, I think about 3 months ago, has landed in the UK in an uncontrolled way. Now that means if we can get
a lot of boats landing, as you know, Mr. Heappey, there are an awful lot of boats. Let me just read you this. This is published in the Mail 10 days ago. Just let me bring you this. The Royal Navy has become embroiled in a row after backing down on its role as a taxi service for migrants in the Channel. The Ministry of Defence telling ministers that Navy ships will return operational control of rescuing migrants and bringing them ashore to Border Force on January the 31st of next year. Is that true?
Well, it just goes to show that what you say in Parliament is the best kept secret in Britain. That date in January is no secret. It's always been the case that naval primacy was due to end in January 2023.
So the Royal Navy currently in charge will be handing that control back over to the Border Force, come what may, in January.
That was always going to be the case.
That's absolutely fine.
Now it may be that discussion happens in the autumn that changes that, but the fact is that story in the Mail was not news. It's something that we'd said all along, that this was primacy that was only until January 2023.
700 Albanian people came across. 1,295 is the most, almost double the highest number on record. The Rwanda plan is currently in the law courts. And alongside the Rwanda plan was an idea of building a new facility in Linton-on-Ouse, a former RAF base, I think. What's happened to that former RAF base and its role with housing migrants who come in that fashion?
Yeah, I mean, that is the key point, that having control over the channel is only a part of the solution, and there must be deterrence on both sides of the channel. So both in terms of
we don't really have control of the channel, do we? Not really.
Well, we certainly don't have control over who gets in a boat in France, no. But we do have control over who lands in the UK. Now, plenty of people have said that is irrelevant. I don't think it is. I think if you can get the right agreements in place with the French around how you disrupt people embarking in the first place, and also the supply chain of boats and motors on the continent, as well as the organised crime gangs who are trafficking people. And then you add to that a mechanism through which you process people when they get to the UK, which includes the offshoring of their asylum.
Well, I'll come to that in just a moment. But on the onshoring
I agree, Tom, that those bits of the jigsaw need to be brought into alignment.
But they aren't.
Otherwise,
Minister.
the machine doesn't work.
They aren't, because the Linton-on-Ouse site, as I understand it, isn't happening anymore.
Well, that is true. The Home Office still have the opportunity to come back and to buy the land from us, but the Secretary of State withdrew the offer on the basis that insufficient progress had been made.
Right, so on piecing this jigsaw together, when it comes to people making that journey from northern France into the UK, where they're processed, how they're processed, who they're processed by, the Royal Navy is going to be handing over control back to Border Force in January. There is no plan to build a facility to house people who make that journey because the place in Linton-on-Ouse has now been rejected. Rwanda, no one's been sent there and is stuck in the law courts. The Home Secretary said yesterday that my record speaks volumes in terms of the Home Office. What do you think people are hearing?
Well, I think that people realise, in fairness, that this is an extraordinarily difficult issue to get after. You can't have control of those getting into boats in France without French cooperation. I think that there is a lot to be said for a new Prime Minister with a new set of relationships, able hopefully to reinvigorate the relationship with France, and therefore I'd agree to have some control on their side of the channel. And similarly, it takes an enormous amount of political courage to stand firm on the Rwanda plan, and indeed to seek similar arrangements. Well, we're going to have to. The fact that it's being challenged in the courts does not mean that it is dead. It just goes to show how much political courage is going to be required to finally make this happen. But make no mistake, if you don't have the returns agreements with countries like Albania, Iraq, Pakistan, where lots of illegal migrants are coming from, if you don't have the deterrent of the offshore processing or offshore asylum that we've proposed with Rwanda, you will not stop the flow of people finding the offer of these despicable traffickers attractive. So we've got to do this. It's going to require a lot of political courage because there's lots of opposition to it within parts of UK society. But I genuinely believe that the vast majority of the British people want there to be control over their borders. They are fair-minded. They want genuine asylum seekers to be able to come here, but they do not want illegal migrants to be able to cross at will. The government is trying to put that in place. I completely accept that it is work in progress, but it doesn't mean that that it is not happening.
Good to speak to you. James Heappey, you're Armed Forces Minister, Conservative MP for Wales. I'll come back to that thought. about the Rwanda plan and what's left of it in a few moments' time. Let's get the news headlines. 8:34. Simon Conway.
Ukraine is marking 31 years since it declared independence from the Soviet Union, but the usual celebrations and military parade in the capital Kyiv have been banned over fears Russia may use the day to carry out fresh